Hello and welcome to a longer than usual episode of Escape from Mount Backlog. Today we'll be looking at Team Ninja's Nioh, recently released on PC. So, I've got a confession to make. I don't like Dark Souls. I'll let that sink in for a moment. Yes, shocking, I know. A YouTube gaming human that doesn't like Dark Souls. I don't hate Dark Souls. In fact, I have immense respect for From Software and the subgenre of RPG that they pioneered with the Souls franchise. They are an immensely talented team and have created their own feverish zeitgeist around it. Prepare to die, get good, praise the sun. These are more than memes. They're the mantra of a subculture. The reason I've bounced off of Dark Souls, I found, is the theme. You see, as a born and bred PC gamer, except for that dark age where I had a console, I've played tons of Western fantasy RPGs. Turn-based action, loot grinds, you name it. From Baldur's Gate to The Witcher, from Diablo 2 to Divinity Original Sin. And with how Dark Souls is presented, a third-person action RPG, I find myself not being able to keep to the game's pace. I play too aggressively. I tend to treat Western-style RPGs as savior of the world power fantasies, and having to slow down for Dark Souls didn't click for me. But this video is about Nioh, and my god, it is exactly what I want. I get the allure of Dark Souls now, and all it took was a change of theme. This game, like Team Ninja's other output, well, if you discount Dead or Alive, but we don't talk about that really, is dripping with style and atmosphere. It hooked me hard. I never knew I wanted to play a samurai game. Now I can't think of life without it. It absolutely came out of nowhere and scratched an itch I didn't even know I had. It has the controls and combo potential of a top tier action game, and one change to the limited stamina mechanic that makes so much goddamn sense, it's criminal. But I'm getting ahead of myself. There's a lot more to Nioh than the game we eventually got. You see, it started life as an unfinished and unproduced script by a legendary Japanese filmmaker, and spoiler alert, I'm going to butcher a ton of Japanese names in this episode, Akira Kurosawa, whose work includes Hidden Fortress, Seven Samurai, and Rashomon. Basically, he's the man who created the samurai as depicted in pop culture. Nioh has been in development in some form since 2004. Originally, it was being developed as a JRPG by an internal Koei team. This version was scrapped in 2008 for not having enough fun elements. So naturally, next up was Omega Force, the developers behind the Warriors franchise. Which made sense at the time. Those games are fun, and this Nioh Warriors version was also scrapped. In 2010, Team Ninja were brought in to help with the action gameplay while it was still under the stewardship of Omega Force. This is where the project pivoted to a more ARPG style game. And in 2012, Team Ninja took over development from Omega Force entirely. Now you'd think with so much work done that the game would be pretty well fleshed out. But according to reports, at this time the game was only planned out in broad strokes, as in, has a Western protagonist, takes place in a historical period, there's action. That's basically it. Team Ninja were responsible for the gameplay, with an internal Koei Tecmo team handling the scenario. Oh right, during the development of Nioh, Koei merged with Tecmo. That's how long it was in development. 13 years. That's dangerously close to Duke Nukem Forever time. That's longer than Diablo 3 and Shenmue, 11 and 6 years respectively. After that long, and after 2 scrapped versions, it's a wonder that it was even released. But that's enough history, let's move on to history. Taking place during the late Sengoku period, around 1600, the story centers around William, an Irish sailor on the hunt for an evil sorcerer, which takes him to Japan, which is currently embroiled in a civil war. This was right before the unification under the Tokugawa shogunate. Look, Koei Tecmo really love historically accurate games, inserting famous characters from the period and embellishing the story with supernatural elements. William, who can see yokai, basically demons, ghosts, and guardian spirits, is quickly contracted to help with the yokai infestation currently ravaging Japan. Basically, William's a Ghostbuster. I'm going to level with you. Unless you have a degree in Japanese history, or a second screen with a wiki running, you may get lost. The story isn't really the focus as much as the characters are. Hattori Hanzo is a standout especially. He's the first Japanese character you meet, and he happens to keep a cat in his gi to tell the time. A time cat. Team Ninja have always had a knack for slipping in ridiculous elements into their games. There are a few comedic moments, but not enough to detract from the overall serious tone. It's exceptionally Japanese. And in a wonderful touch, William is the only Western voice-acted character. All the Japanese characters are portrayed by Japanese voice actors, and naturally speak almost exclusively in Japanese. I found this really helped set up William as an interloper, a fish out of water, to use that old cliche. But now that's really enough history. Gameplay. Where do I even start? It's hands down Team Ninja at their best. This is the most mechanically satisfying game I've played in years. The combat system is deep, between weapon switching, stance changes, ninjutsu, magic. There's a lot to get into. Pro tip, take it slow. There are 7 types of melee weapons, namely swords, dual swords, spears, axes, kurisigawa, kusarigama, odachi, and tonfas, each with their own playstyles, strengths, and weaknesses attached. Personally, I stuck with classic swords and dumped points into magic. There is seriously so much to get into with the nuances of each weapon class that it could be its own video. Let's just simplify with saying that you will likely find your favorite and easily slip into a playstyle. Whether you prefer hitting once and hard, or so many times you effectively stun lock enemies, you will find something for you. On top of that, there are skill trees for each weapon type, allowing to further customize your build. And I can't even describe how good the game feel is. It's old Devil May Cry good. It's up there with Platinum's best. It's as satisfying to play as 2016's Doom. Again, as I said in the beginning, a lot of comparisons have been made between Nioh and Dark Souls, and these are mostly applicable. I mean, the game is hard, as punishing as Dark Souls. It has a similar item setup, even the UI is similar, and I suppose this is that part of the video. Before we can continue, yes, it is similar to Dark Souls in some key areas. You trade XP for a single point in an ability when you level. When you die, you lose all the XP you've gathered, but you can reclaim it if you make it to your grave. All the enemies are reset when you die, save for mini-bosses that lock in these dark clouds. In fact, on a surface level analysis, it is, as some have called it, a samurai-themed Souls-like. It even has a stamina mechanic that works like Dark Souls', except for one change that completely changes the combat rhythm: ki pulsing, which is a revelation. Basically, when you expend stamina, or ki as it's called in this game, you will get a chance to reclaim it, with a well-timed push of a button or a dodge. Think of it like active reloading Gears of War, kind of. This not only speeds up combat significantly, but adds a more immediate risk-reward dynamic to the moment-to-moment gameplay. It's constantly pushing you to play more aggressively, to take more chances, to land that killing blow, helped along by the fact that all the enemies are bound to the same stamina mechanics you are, effectively giving you an opportunity to wear enemies down and open them up to near fatal or outright fatal strikes. It's fantastic. And the last major part of the gameplay, once you reach Japan after the tutorial mission, you're granted a choice between 3 guardian spirits, and you should pick Isunade. Why, you may ask? Well, what other game lets you have a freaking shark as your literal spirit animal? Also, early game, his enemy sensibility will save your skin from ambushing enemies. Also, did I mention he's a freaking shark spirit? The guardian spirit also ties into another mechanic, the living weapon. basically gaining enough XP. It fills up a bar and you can unlock the living weapon, which in effect makes you invulnerable for a very short time and allows you to deal exponentially more damage. Nioh follows the Diablo school of loot drops, as in you're drowned in it. Enemies shed weapons and armor as often as their own blood. Tons of loot. Tons of the stuff. Thankfully, you start with a frankly obnoxiously large cosmic pocket inventory. You start with a capacity for 500 items. And on top of that, as you would expect, usable items mostly stack. So you'd be hard pressed to run out of space. But the random loot that you hoover up isn't completely useless. If you don't want to equip any of your new finds, you can either offer them at shrines for XP, sell them for that cold hard coin, or break them down into components, which can then be used in an actually really simple crafting system to make better weapons. Of course, as this is a Diablo style loot system, you get your normal, magical, rare, epic and set items. But unlike most games with this type of system, if you're particularly fond of a set of abilities attached to a piece of gear, you can use the soul match mechanic, sacrificing a higher level item to bring your favorite item back up to level. You can also reforge items to effectively reroll bonuses, and later with Umbersight, a rare resource, you can apply a specific stat to a weapon. Not to mention the refashion ability, letting you change the appearance of your gear, within reason of course. Can't refashion a sword to look like an axe, but you can turn a silly helmet into a straw hat. There's so much to the gear system between the loot and blacksmithing that I spend hours looking at my gear, hunting better items, reforging, soul matching, doing whatever it takes to optimize my gear. I like stats. And you need your gear at its best to take on revenants, or as I like to call them, murder ghosts. Throughout the level, in some places at higher concentrations, you will find glowing red graves. These are the graves of other players who have died on these spots. So if you see a bunch around a chest, you'd better be ready, because that is likely a trap. Walk up to a grave and you can summon a revenant, which is a ghost of the character that died there, with all the stats and gear that player had upon death. So it's not only sort of a community created guide like the messages in Dark Souls, but also a form of asynchronous multiplayer, where you can fight fallen players and claim their loot. It is the most efficient way to get better gear. It's also way more fun to fight these optional murder ghosts than it has any right to be. I've cleared levels fighting every single revenant without regret. But of course, it's published by Koei Tecmo, so I would be remiss to not talk about the port. As much as I love this game, I have to address the overall mediocre quality of the port, at least at the time of recording. There are noticeable performance issues that appear regardless of quality settings. Unexpected frame drops, like going into a cave, tanked the frame rate in my case. And it launched without proper keyboard and mouse support. It was patched in later, but a PC game should always launch with at the very least keyboard mouse support. No exceptions. But with Nioh, as with other ports from consoles, the controller is a better way to play. This is why I have a 360 pad knocking about. Some games are built for controllers first. Despite these issues, however, turns out Nioh is still one of Koei Tecmo's better ports. I mean, at least this one supports English. I'm looking at you, all of the Nobunaga's Ambition games. And it does at least run at 60 FPS. Going beyond 60 FPS is just not possible, and even if it is possible, I wouldn't recommend it. It's a Japanese developed game, so it will break the physics. But damn it, despite the port, I can't not recommend this game. It's just got so much depth to its gameplay that I'm addicted. It's also, at least here in South Africa due to a quirk in pricing, cheaper than Dark Souls the First, and less than half the price it holds on the PS Store. There is so much more to Nioh. I've barely scratched the surface. I haven't touched on co-op, which does exist, Twilight missions, which are basically the same missions but infinitely harder, but their rewards are great, and the fact that there's a New Game Plus. Nioh is a slick, stylish, action-focused RPG with deep, satisfying combat and levels upon levels of gear customization. I can see only one downside to the whole experience: the lack of a character creator. But that's easily forgiven when William shows up in cutscenes, looking like Geralt of Rivia in Japan. Also, the little Kodama you get to collect throughout the game are just so damn adorable with their bowls as hats. And that'll just about wrap up this episode of Escape from Mount Backlog. Have you picked up Nioh yet? Is it on your wish list? Are you waiting for a sale? Let me know in the comments down below. And as always guys, don't forget to like this video, share it with your friends, subscribe if you haven't already, and if you are subscribed, hit that notification bell so you can get notified when I upload more videos. And tune in next time when we look at something completely different. Bye.